Yeah, we want really.
Yeah.
That's right.
Not that much. I don't know. Always if you did this.
Okay. Yeah, one of my friends. Yeah, yeah. So they keep it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I really like the tree.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers.
Yeah, John.
I'm grateful but confused. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are located here in Treaty 1 territory, and the land on which we gather is, of course, in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Niniwak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, in the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, of course, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Worcestershire. I won't take up too much of your time, and I've been told to keep it very informal off the top, so I won't read the many, many awards and honors that our guests this evening have received, I promise. And we're so very glad that you're all here to hear from an incredible duo that the Prairie Comics Festival has brought in for their 2024 festival. We're always thrilled to partner with them because they bring us incredible high-quality events such as this one, so enormous gratitude. And the host here tonight is, of course, S.M. Whitaker, the artistic director of the Prairie Comics Festival. I'm not allowed to read her bio either, but I will just slide in that if you like Sam's work, she'll be launching on October 15th. Her new book comes out then, so be back in this space right then. Tonight, we are welcoming E.M. Carroll and Faith Erin Hicks, two comics creators completely beloved by McNally Robinson Booksellers. We're thrilled to have them here. Thrilled you could be here for this. Please give them an enormous round of applause.
Thank you, John. One day we all have to come together and make a Facebook page for John in the same way that Cheryl Lashing has one, so that John can be much venerated, because he keeps this party lifting up and down, much like an elevator. In any case, I've had a long day. Welcome to our wonderful event here tonight with our headliner guest from Prairie Comics Festival, who here, and that's also can be for the folks at home, went to the festival today. Yay! Yes, so we're so excited to have you two here. You're both from out of town. Thank you for coming to Winnipeg. I won't deprecate it because Winnipeg is great. I don't want to hear anything else. Where are you two from?
I came in from Vancouver.
Nice.
And I came in from Stratford, Ontario.
Right. Wow. Amazing. So yes, welcome. So I know that you folks make comics. You make a couple of comics. You're very, very well known. And have either of you come to Winnipeg to like do any like comic like book launches or any other kind of events in the past?
I don't think so.
This is my first time here.
I feel like I've been to the Prairies once before, but I don't think it was Winnipeg.
No, there's a lot of it. So could have been anywhere.
Yeah, could have been anywhere.
It could have been Carberry. But that's great. Yeah, so I remember when I invited the two of you, you both had very similar responses, which were, oh, I hadn't even thought of it. All right. So I hope that we made a good impression so far. Yeah. So how has your day at Prairie Comics Festival gone as well?
It was really good. It was
You sold out.
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds like I brought a pile of stuff. I did not bring that stuff. But I often don't table at conventions. I come in and do signings or things like that because I don't go to a lot of conventions. So this was like a nice novelty for me to come back and do tabling because like selling books is great, but like I do like doing the drawings for people and talking to people and just like meeting people. So even though I don't have books anymore, like I'm happy to do drawings or sign anything. Everyone's been like really lovely. It's been very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really fun vibes, and a lot of younger readers, which is typically the people reading my books. And yeah, someone gave me some fan art that they'd drawn, and then a short time later, her friend came back and gave me another piece of fan art that she'd drawn that she was too shy to give me the first time. So I have like 2 little pieces of fan art, and they're super cute. And I don't know, fan art makes me so happy. I feel like that's one of the coolest gifts you can give an author is to do a drawing of one of their characters.
Did you get a lot of fan art?
Not anymore. I used to get a ton, but yeah, I don't see it as much anymore. Typically, if I go to cons, sometimes people will bring me a drawing, but I feel like it's a lot more infrequent than it used to be.
I've gotten a few small pieces, but I don't usually get a lot, and it is always a delight.
A delight, absolute
Yeah.
delight. Yeah, I have a little binder at home that has some of the fan arts that I've gotten from the readers.
That's fun.
Yeah, I can just imagine the fan art that you received.
Oh, I
Like
know.
for horror.
Yeah, there's been some great stuff, like it's really cool. But yeah, it is not, I guess probably like more kids stuff, probably you'll get more kids drawing, so like I don't get as many kids drawing whatever corpses. I do horror. So, yeah, you know.
Yeah, we did kind of, yeah, I didn't even say, hey, introduce yourself. We just kind of went for it, so we can back it up a little bit. So, want to talk a bit about your work?
Yeah, so I do, I started off doing web comics, because we both did.
Yeah.
I did like short form web comics. They're all horror, and they're still on my website, which is encarroll.com, including a fan comic I did most recently. But then I moved in, I did a short story collection of horror comics, and I've done a couple YA books. Speak was an adaptation of a novel called Speak. And then most recently, last year, I did a book called A Guest in the House, which is my first like full-length graphic novel that I wrote and drew myself, of my own creation. So that was sort of a departure for me, because I do mostly do short story.
Yeah, Through the Woods was excellent, and then you're like done it, and you're like, I just want more, I just want more of this. And Guest in the House is just such a great gothic. I was like in discords with people being like, what was that ending? Oh,
In a good way.
yeah, in a good way, like a
Gotten both.
in a tear my hair out way, but that was good, which comes from love, reading your work, which is really great. And Faith, did you want to talk a bit about yours as well?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I'm saying, you know, you mostly do short stories. I'm incapable of doing anything short. My very first comic, which was a web comic, I did online starting when I was very young. I was a teenager when I started drawing it. When I finished it, it was 5 years later, and it was over 750 pages long. And that was my first comic.
Yeah, good first project.
Yeah, you know, just
get it out of your
So
system.
that's actually impressive, because a lot of people, you ask them what comic they want to make, and like, especially when you're a teenager, you have like this grand epic design, and like I got like 16 pages into my hand of it, and most people like don't even get that, so like you actually did it.
Yeah, I don't know what possessed me, to be honest. Since then, I've published more than a dozen graphic novels, probably most known for Friends with Boys, Nothing Could Possibly Go Wrong. I did a fantasy trilogy called The Nameless City. I did a prequel to the Last of Us video game that was published, gosh, like 10 years ago. And then most recently, I did a graphic novel called Ride On, which is a little bit based on my experiences as a horse girl. And then last year, my latest graphic novel was published. It's called Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy, and it's pretty much what it says in the title. So yeah, many, many books. And also I write Avatar: The Last Airbender comics, which are published by Dark Horse.
Yes, and you also wrote a book called Comics Will Break Your Heart.
Yes, I also did a word book.
A word
Yes,
book. It's
as they are called in the biz. A word book.
I was going through it, I was like, where are the pictures?
Yes, I know. Astonishing. Yeah, that one is actually also about comics. It's called Comics Will Break Your Heart.
Yeah. And yes, you both have like such a wonderful breadth of work. And such completely different, well, they're different genres, fantasy, like fiction relationships, like very character driven. And did you mention Pumpkinheads?
Oh yeah, I also
So many books you forgot.
I know.
Sorry,
There's so many.
Yeah.
Wake up at night, I'm like, how many books have I read? The American author Rainbow Rowell, she wrote a graphic novel, and I was the illustrator on that project. It's called Pumpkinheads.
Yeah, and actually that's a good segue into my next question, which is like the two of you are both writers and comic artists. For the most part, you're kind of the lead on the projects of your heart. So, but then you are in these situations where you collaborate, like with Rainbow's book and with Speak as well. Do you want to talk maybe a little bit about those experiences and maybe how they were good or how they were like kind of uncomfortable or you didn't really mind?
I'll go first. So I've worked with a writer twice on graphic novels. On shorter work, I've also worked with a writer. And I think going forward, I'm just gonna write my own stuff. Like nothing against them, they did a great job. But like I am so sort of solitary and controlling in my work that like whenever I make something, I want to get it done as fast as possible. I think of it as like a cooked, steak or something, and it's like cooling on the plate. If I don't finish it, it's going to be disgusting at a certain point. So like, and one of the requirements of working with somebody else is that you have to run things by them.
Yeah.
And they have to be like,
changed.
and then they have to get changed, and they edit, and it's just like that kills it for me. Like so, for both those books, I had to do full, thumbnails and full roughs, and then another round of edits, and then they would get back to me months later about this and that.
Speak is a long book.
Yes,
It's a very
yeah,
big
it's like
book, yeah.
400 pages or something.
Yeah.
But so that it's sort of, yeah, just like kills the energy of it for me. So for my own work, I just sort of go more straight into doing the art of it, and I get to like, I don't know, pick which scene I want to work on, which thing I want to do, and I can adjust it and change it as I go. So I just think it's more satisfying to me personally to just work by myself, but mostly because I'm just like controlling it. I want to be left alone.
And it's okay.
Have my headphones on
And
and just do
audiences are really hungry for like melting pictures that you create,
Hopefully,
and just
yeah.
bodies coming apart. Oh, don't worry, it's never gonna happen. Yeah, well, that's great.
And you've never worked on licensed comics, have you?
No, I haven't.
No.
Yeah, I was just curious about that. So I've had a variety of experiences with collaborators. I did a young adult graphic novel called Nothing Could Possibly Go Wrong, which was actually my adaptation of another writer's unpublished novel, young adult novel. That was actually really fun because I felt like she was very flexible and very laid back and allowed me to kind of take this work and adapt it.
So
to
you wrote the
comics.
script for it?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and adapt it in a way that I saw fit.
Yeah.
Pumpkinheads was different in that I was not adapting someone else's work. Rainbow actually wrote a script for me, and what she wrote was essentially a screenplay. So it had visual direction in it, all the dialogue, all the action in it. And then I took that script and basically wrote a second script, just breaking it into comic paneling, and then we went back and forth from there. I feel like there's ups and downs of collaborating and then also of working on your own. Like I've actually just come off doing 3 books in a row that were completely my own. So I did Ride On, I did Hockey Girl, Ellsmere Boy, and then I just finished up a graphic novel called In Betweens, which will be out in 2026. And those were good experiences, but it can also be a very lonely experience. It's just you and hopefully an editor. And also, sometimes you reach a point, I sort of reached the point right now where I feel like I'm scraping the bottom of my creativity barrel. And that just kind of comes sometimes when you're working in a creative field where you've just spent all of your creativity and put it into these books, and it's like time for renewal. And usually when I get to that point, and it's happened a few times in my career, I know I need to collaborate with someone and I need to have their input, their creativity kind of coming and helping lift me up. So my next 2 projects, which are not announced yet, so I can't say anything about them, but my next 2 projects are, one is an adaptation and then one is another collaboration. So, I'm excited to dive into those and allow me a chance to like refill my creative well. That sounds, I don't know, that sounds very like artsy fartsy, but it is a metaphor that works.
Yeah.
And then also I work on licensed comics. I write Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that's a real different kettle of fish. I'm a huge fan of Avatar. I work directly with the show's creators, Brian Kinsko and Michael DiMartino. And they're very creative, they have a bird's eye view of the Avatar franchise, they know it really, really well, and it's fun to, as a fan, collaborate with them, also deeply intimidating. Oh my god, yeah, like I've been working on Avatar for quite a few years now, but I remember being absolutely terrified when I first started working on that book, or that franchise. And not only that, but I was the second writer to work on those comics, and the first writer on that project was Gene Yang. And that man's a literal certified genius. He has a MacArthur Genius Grant Award, so big shoes. Yeah, so it's like, I feel like they have, different strengths and weaknesses. I go through periods where I don't want to work with anyone else. I love the fact that comics, one person can make a comic and it's my creative vision and it comes out of my head. But I reach a point where it's like, I'm sick of myself. I'm sick of all the stories that I have in my head. And at that point, I know it's time to reach out to a collaborator and hopefully find someone who is interesting to work with.
Yeah, that's a healthy way to do it, as opposed to like, I just go mad.
Yeah.
I just like
It
completely
doesn't
lose.
come across at
I just
all.
lose my mind and then be like, I'll never make a comic again.
Yeah. And then you just open your eyes
Okay,
and it's
yeah.
just a new affair, and it's just,
Yeah.
just manifested. And speaking of manifesting, because the two of you have like such a long, it's so long, your list of accomplishments and publications. But you both mentioned that you both started as webcomic creators, so you were basically just like, I want to do this. I'm not waiting for anyone to tell me I can.
Yeah, sort of. Well, like we were talking about this too, because we met online because you were doing Demonology 101 and we were posting to the same weird fantasy art website.
Oh yeah.
And so like I did fan art, like we did fan art for each other when we were
Yeah.
teenagers.
Wow.
And
Back in the day.
yeah.
And
And
then didn't you go to school together too?
yeah, sharing to sharing in
College,
college,
yeah.
for animation.
Neither of us are working in animation.
Yeah, for good or
So,
ill,
yeah.
that's how that went. But like I didn't get back into actually making comics until I was in my late 20s, because I was very hung up on the idea of not doing them correctly or not doing them right, or like that I was gonna somehow get yelled at by somebody, like anyone would care.
Someone just come out of nowhere
Yeah.
and just on your live journal, just be like, you
Yeah.
can't do it. And then you'd
Yeah.
be like, oh, they're right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd be like, it's that thing of like people give you a million compliments and then you get like one negative comment and you're like, okay, well that person gets it, like
Yeah.
they see it.
Yeah.
But so like it took me a long time. I had to give myself the permission to like draw badly and, do whatever,
Right.
fail at it
Yeah.
in order to go forward with it. But it came after like a long period of time where a lot of like friends that I went to charity with had become cartoonists and had made their own comics. So I think and I did post in a live journal. So without that, I don't think I would have had the gumption or courage. to
Yeah,
do it.
like you can't really be what you can't see, but like if you start finding those community people where you're like, well, they're doing it.
Yeah.
Eventually, but also like, oh, this won't even land. But I'm sure you didn't draw badly. Sure, like what you perceive.
I was probably fine,
was
but like
probably
I was like I think it was
It wasn't
also
as
like
good as that fantasy art that you were really like,
Yeah.
on, but it was an Elfwood.
on Elfwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I think what was I gonna say? I completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, I think I just needed to try. And
Yeah.
I think I was that's what I was gonna say. I think animation had instilled a fear of doing something wrong or breaking the rules, and or like being off model in animation is such a huge thing. And like for some reason ported that over to comics, like that matters at all. Like, and once I realized I could go off model every panel, that's when I sort of relaxed into it. And then I just found that I really like doing it. I found the satisfaction of that. Like, because before that I had wanted to do write short stories, word books, if you will. And then I tried that and it was always a struggle for me. And so this just happened to be like the medium that felt best.
And certainly you've been embraced in all of the, I keep saying melting. I'm like trying to think of like another way to describe your work.
Your brain is melting. That's what it is.
Yeah. Lots of people just really connect with everything that you're putting on the page, the horrific, the human condition, the character study of what people do in these bizarre situations that actually are just reflective of our times. Yeah.
About the.
Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, I feel like the reason I got started was just, there was no one to tell me no.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just feel like, what comics in general, the barrier of entry is extremely low. Like, I feel like there's a long tradition of self-publishing and of publishing online that is very respectable, I don't know how the prose world works, but I do feel like there's a pretty
large gatekeeping.
Yeah, gatekeeping and large barriers of entry, self-publishing and traditional publishing is very, very separate, or seems very separate to me, and it's less so in comics. I feel like, so there's such a huge tradition of underground publishing and like going to cons and meeting community there. I don't know, and we talked about this earlier, but it's like, I feel like I didn't have fear of drawing badly because I thought my art was just so bad. So I was just like telling this particular story that I had the story that I had in my heart. And I was putting it out there on the web, and there was no one to tell me no. And then also at the time that I was putting webcomics online, the internet was like this weird like feral place, and it was like all kids online.
What webcomics were on that were like page a week, couple pages a week type webcomics?
I feel like,
when did you start?
So I started in 1999.
Yeah, like
wow.
what was there?
Yes.
I can't even remember the names of some of the like a lot.
So
of
I think it was like Penny Arcade,
Control Alt
TV. And I feel like at the time, typically 3-panel strip comics, like newspaper style comics were the norm, and those were like the popular comics. And to have like, so what I did, my Comic Demonology 101 was basically about Buffy the Vampire Slayer ripoff about a teenage girl, and went to high school, had normal teenage girl problems, and then there was also this supernatural stuff happening in the background, and it was one of the very, very few like full page story comics. So it was basically a soap opera. And like all the other comics that were popular and regularly updated, I do feel like were, Penny Arcade. So I also remember at the time, I'm sure you guys have heard of this cartoonist, Brian Lee O'Malley. Okay, so he was online at the time, and I really loved his work. And he would constantly start up these amazing webcomics and then abandon them, and like the internet would go into a tizzy. Oh, he's starting a new comic, he's doing it again, guys, all right. And then you would abandon them like 20 pages in, and it was a cycle with him, and like it was actually really funny when he started getting published and like started having work like Scott Pilgrim come out, and it was like, he's actually gonna finish it, oh my god.
Like now I can find him and beg him to just finish that.
It was really funny. Like I remember he was one of the few comic creators at the time that was, doing full page comics, but he just couldn't seem to maintain them. And my comic actually developed a readership and a community around it simply because I updated regularly. So I'd update every Sunday night in between like 2 to 15 pages, which is wild.
Wow.
And I did it consistently for 5 years. And that was what gave me a readership. And nowadays it's very, very different. Now publishing online is legitimate. You have comics like frigging Lore Olympus, which is one of the best-selling comics nowadays, started out online. But back then, whole different, the internet was a very different animal. And I don't know, it's not that it wasn't like a toxic, difficult place to be, it wasn't like there wasn't like a ton of infighting or people being horrible to each other, but I do have some nostalgia for that time. Just the sheer like DIY nature of it all. Like nowadays it's very strange, like Webtoons, the platform that I believe Lore Olympus started on, like the company itself just went public for like billions of dollars, and it's like, that's crazy. Like there's no money in webcomics.
No, and I remember
Not for the artist.
Not for the artist.
No, and when it launched, it was kind of like, oh yeah, we're like really supporting new artists, and now it's very much like we're supporting kind of that mega artist lifestyle where you're working for 21 hours and there's a team that's creating a comic instead of like that single. And there were at the beginning, which was like 5 years ago, it was not that recent, but there were a lot of just single creator who were just, making 4 pages a week and then doing it on that platform. And they did this like study about just digital readership had exploded in like Korea and with Manhwa. And yeah, it's a completely different beast now, and it's all very ad driven, just like everything else. But it does show that there is still that hunger to like, I want to set my watch by when my new comic is coming out in my pocket. And I like, I long for that spirit of being like, oh, it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
What's coming up? It like Meredith Grant as another.
Oh yeah,
Optimus
Optimus Prime.
Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
I was just flipping through. I bought it on Kickstarter because they collected it. And that was just a fun way to discover new folks. Now it's you come to a comic festival and you can feel like it's the 90s again. Yeah, I was gonna ask what you two are working on, but you've already covered that. You just dropped a 300-page book. Like, well, I'm done, off to Winnipeg. And you just did Guest House. Can I ask what you're working on next?
Yeah, I can't really quite talk about it yet. I don't want to jinx it. But it's more horror type stuff. I talked about this earlier too, that like at a certain point I just wanted to draw something that was fun. Like I just wanted to have fun drawing. So I just thought about what I have the most fun drawing, and I get really into the weeds on like details and costumes and things like that. So I wanted to do like a big splashy, over detailed, which is sort of what I'm working on now.
Yeah.
But it will still be horror, but it's just like I want to have fun as opposed to like excising some like horrible trauma I'm going through or whatever, which I think is part of why I
myself can become the trauma. Then
Yeah, like,
excise in the next project.
that's how I like that's I feel like, and that's how I'm sort of like burnt out after books, is that like I was like really going through it, so that by the time I finished like Guest in the House, I was like just hating everything. And but I think it's because I had so much of myself tied up into it, and I just was doing therapy to myself. So,
Wait a minute.
it could be so embarrassing, and it is, but that's the deal. So this time I'm just like, I want to have fun. I only do a bit of.
It's fun.
Only it's some therapeutic stuff.
Right. I'm not gonna. How did you get into horror? Like, it's just something that you liked and you were a fan of.
I was
like, let me make some more.
I was on a panel earlier today about horror comics at the festival. I talked about this, that initially it was just because I have a brother who's 4 years older than me, and my dad really likes horror movies and like cult movies. We have like that book cult movies that came out in the 80s, and my dad let us watch anything we wanted. So I wanted to hang out with my dad and my older brother, so we would just watch horror together, and you mentioned earlier
like
too.
Completely age inappropriate, but you're just like.
Well, this is totally not age. Like he would be like, oh, there's like some movies where he'd say like Black kind of meanders, and he would fast forward them, and I would know that's when there was a sex scene or nudity, and or he did like cover my eyes and ears if there was like something, so that I can rewatch movies now that I'm like, oh, this has like.
Oh yeah.
This scene that I never saw before.
Censoring it for you live.
But I mostly like I wasn't a kid who like was. Like I didn't have nightmares. I had nightmares just generally, but not based on like horror movies that I watched.
Yeah.
And so I found it like a way to bond with people in my family. My mom hated this; she does not like horror movies. But my brother and my dad and me would make our homemade horror movies and stuff like that.
Nice.
And so so I saw like a bunch of really weird genre movies as a kid, and then just kind of grew up with that. Now it's like. I just find it like comforting and fun from that. And when I want to like do, my art therapy, which is comics, that is the genre I go to the most, just because it is the most like visceral, I think.
Yes.
In that way.
But in a nice way.
I find it nice. Like it's nice for me.
And there are obviously a lot of readers who also find it nice. We're just like, they like connect with it and they're like, yes, very good.
Yeah.
Yes, more blood. And it just makes them feel seen that same way.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like I just don't, because I was a kid who liked horror and drew scary things and whatever else, I have no like barometer for like a kid who's scared of stuff. Like everyone's like, is this appropriate for my 10-year-old? And I'm like, man, I would give it to I mean, whatever. Like Quentin Tarantino always talks about how he's like, I let my kids watch whatever I make. And it's like, okay. Like I guess I'm the same. Like I was just like, it depends on the kid, right? It depends on the adults.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, Faith, you kind of are you do a lot of genre crossing. in my mind, I was like, oh, you're a fantasy creator, but I mean, that
Yeah, I
Avatar
mean-
is kind of where you're, what else they do with fantasy?
Yeah, like I did the Nameless City, which is technically fantasy, although it doesn't have a magical system or like, you know, weird creatures. It's maybe alternate fantasy history or something like that. Yeah, I feel like most of my work has been realistic fiction, but then maybe with a bit of a twist. Friends with Boys was based on my experiences being homeschooled and then going to public high school for the first time. The main character in that book also has three brothers. I also have three brothers, but there's a ghost in it.
That was not in.
No, I have never seen a ghost, alas. It's like, I don't think they're real, but when the lights go off, I'm like, oh, there's probably a ghost. Like,
This is my moment, finally.
I'm
Yeah.
here on the side of ghosts.
yeah,
until-
exactly. Until I see, you know, like, proof the otherwise. I don't know, I feel like my books have, a lot of them have been in the realistic fiction genre, but then they've always had a bit of a twist to them. Ride On, for example, is realistic fiction. It's based on my experiences as a horse girl, but it's also based on my experience being deeply, deeply in love with Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yes.
Still in love with that. So it's like there's a whole subplot in
Yeah,
that
I
book.
love that subplot.
Thank you.
At the
I'm
end,
so
where
glad.
They all watch together.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So that's it's my love letter to horse girls, but also Star Trek.
So you willingly chose to draw a bunch of horses?
I did. Yeah. Horses are notorious.
Yeah.
They are, yes.
Yeah.
But like when you were a kid, did you draw horses
Yes,
a lot? So do you have like
repeatedly.
a bedrock of horse knowledge?
I do have a bedrock, like I do have a knowledge of their anatomy, and also I actually rode horses for many years, so I know how they work, you know, and
How their
actually.
knees bend and whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, and actually, it is one of my huge pet peeves to see poorly drawn horses, and especially poorly drawn tack. So tack is the equipment that goes on a horse, so like bridles and saddles, and it's like, I see it in comics all the time, and I'll just be reading this comic, and I'm like, that's not how it is, you know, it's not right, you
You're
know,
just typing out the strongly worded letter,
Yes,
and you're like, why didn't you
yes.
hire me as a consultant?
I'm such a jerk when it comes to horse stuff in comics.
That's
And like
why you
I've
do
not
this.
ridden for a very long time, and it's like I know how that stuff looks, you know. So that was actually one of my quests with this comic. It was like, I'm going to draw accurate horses and accurate tack. But honestly, I will say I don't mind drawing horses so much. I really just like drawing bicycles. I hate drawing
Oh,
bicycles.
yeah, same.
You have to draw a lot of zany stuff in Pumpkinheads.
No bicycles, no.
No, but there's like
That was
those
your
cars,
contract.
and there's an apple car, there's like and a lot of food.
Yeah, the food is fun.
Yeah.
Food is fun to draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything organic, I feel like is fun to draw.
Yeah, but
I don't-
mechanical, if you
Yeah.
look even just like one part being off, it will
Yeah.
throw the whole thing off. Cars are also really hard.
Yeah, I hate drawing cars. If you see a car in my book, I've probably traced it from a photograph. I hate drawing
I'll do
cars.
that too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, every artist does this. Do not believe anyone who says they draw cars freehand. I do not
I
believe that.
remember one time, I was hanging out with my nephews, and one of my nephews was like 3. He was asking me to draw something, and so I was there with my sister-in-law, and he was like, "Draw me a car," and I was like,
No.
So I drew something, and my sister-in-law looked at it, and she was like, "Wow, that is surprisingly shitty." I was like, "Yeah, I don't draw cars. You see, it's not my wheelhouse."
She's just looking from you
Yeah,
to
she
their
was
like
like,
nephew, she's like,
"Oh,
who did this?
just like thoughtful, like wow."
Oh. Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like just because artists have weaknesses, like it's like just because we can draw something really well, it doesn't mean we can draw everything.
But it's
really
also, it's
well.
not even weaknesses, it's like disinterest.
Yes,
Like I'm just not interested
absolutely.
in learning how to, I could have been one.
Yeah. Yeah, like I look
I can draw the
at
best.
like
If I wanted to,
I
but I don't want to.
Yeah. Like I look at the machinery and the vehicles that Akira Toriyama draws. He's the guy who created Dragon Ball Z, and the way he draws vehicles is amazing. And I look at it and I'm like, yes, I would love to learn how to draw vehicles like that. And then I actually sit down to learn, and I'm like, no.
He loved it.
Yeah, he loved
you
it.
can tell when,
Yeah.
I think you can really tell when somebody enjoys drawing what they're drawing versus, that's another reason why I really want to just work on my own stuff, because I know what I like drawing, and I think it kind of shows when I enjoy it.
Yeah. Imagine it still being an animation, having to animate a car. So the Erin's next book, it's gonna be a book of cards. It's
Yeah.
just gonna be Anne's favorite cards. Yeah, and one year at Ellsmere was
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. So that one I kind of forget about because, so I had a book published by First Second Books in 2020 called 1 Year at Ellsmere, and it is actually a very revamped version of a graphic novel that came out in 2008. It was actually, yeah, it was my second published graphic novel. It was published by this indie publisher and sold like maybe 1,000 copies. It was very, very, very limited release. And my publisher for a second was interested in it. And I was like, looked at the artwork and was like, no, you can't publish it in this state. So what I did was I took the old pages from 2008, scanned them into my computer, sort of like redrew most of the figures, and then printed them out and re-inked the entire book.
Wow.
It was a lot of work, but it basically meant I had a newish book to go in like 4 months, which was amazing. So yeah, I'm really happy with, it's like an HD remake or something like that, you know, like they do in video games.
Remaster.
Yeah, but that one is very like, feels very genre, because like on the surface it's about 2 girls at boarding school, but then they're next to like this spooky forest and there's like mysterious goings on in the forest, and I don't know, I feel like it's influenced by like Diana Wynne Jones, you know, that type of children's book author. And I did have like the story for a whole trilogy, so if it had actually sold well, there would have been like a lot more. And
It would
that
have
one,
been 2 years at Ellsmere.
yeah, like, and that one would have been spooky, like that one there was like a family curse and like ghosts and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, it didn't sell very well, so I didn't get to finish the story.
Would you still try to, or are you kind of like prevented from doing that? Or you're just like,
I mean,
there's more things to do.
if it sold, you know, if I woke up the next morning and it had sold like 2 million copies, I would absolutely do it, you know, but yeah, like that's kind of the level, it's like,
Yeah.
there just isn't the interest, and that's fine, you know, I feel like it works okay as a standalone. But yeah, and that hasn't happened to me really, I mean, it really hasn't happened to me at all, where I started a story hoping that I could continue it and didn't get to continue it.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate in that regards.
Just wanna briefly check the time and see if we can turn it over to audience questions. Folks would have some. Oh, we've got oceans of time. Sorry, no, but if someone does have a question, please feel free to interject while we are talking. Oh, thank you, John. Now I can see. And now no one has to see me check my phone on the live stream. I was going to ask about process. Do you just kind of, maybe I'll just narrow it down to projects that are just your own, that you're not collaborating with anyone on, because then no one can tell you anything what to do. You just jump into it. Yeah, how do you start? And like, are you doing like that traditional script, thumbs, pencils, going straight to inks?
I don't do that. If I'm collaborating with people, they want to do that because they have to like approve things. But
The worst.
I have a really, we were talking earlier about like how even though if a method is inefficient, if you know it and it's comfort, like you don't have to learn anything new, then you do it, or I do it. So like my inefficient process is that when I get the idea for a new comic, I have to go into like what is more or less final art, like right away, because I would like to figure out what the limits of my ability are in terms of like, you know, conveying what's in my mind to the page. I need to know, saying to a friend recently that I was like, there's the comic that lives in your head, and then there's the comic that your stupid hands make. And I was like, so I need to know what my hands are capable of making so I don't get like carried away being like, okay, and then I'll get really good at drawing and do this here. Like I need to like see how it's going to look and figure it out, and then that will inform how I tell the rest of the story and the decisions I make once I know like the limit of my skills. So I'll do like I have a script book where I'll like thumbnail like tiny chicken scratch thumbnails and put in some text, even if it's just like say something about, you know, cheese here or whatever the story is. And then I'll just start drawing it. And I usually, like right now with the thing I'm working on, I'll work in like 6-page chunks. So I'll like go through and thumbnail out like 6 pages, and I sort of know, like I have like a, what do you call it, like a mind map of like where I want the story to go. And I will, I'll thumbnail it out very quickly, and then I'll do like pencils, and they're pretty loose pencils, and then I will ink and color and letter. And then, because the thing is, then I'll show it to my editor. And if she's like, no, and I decide to take that on, which I don't always do, then I'll be like, okay, well, I'll throw out that page. Like, I'd rather make the page and then see how it's not working and then get rid of it than have to get mired in roughs.
Yeah.
Which
then
leads to a
still
lot of work
everything.
being thrown out, but
Yeah.
whatever.
No, don't really throw them out. Save them in a box that you can go and look at later.
Right, yes, they're all in my
Yes.
like old folder.
Right, sorry, it's not a real box.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating to me, like, this convention, I've been talking with them a lot about their process, and, you seem to work so differently from how I do, and like.
Yeah, it's not a
So-
popular one. It's not good.
But so like, you don't script things ahead of time and like get notes from your editor on the story or
No.
anything? Wow, okay.
No, I just
Wow.
like, guest in the house, I finished the book. And then I sent it in, and then they took a long time with it, and then they were like, oh, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, and I'll be like, okay, well, I can change this, I can add this. So I went in, added pages, removed pages, changed spacing on things, but like I just adjusted or redrew what I had. And then, yeah, like it is not an efficient way to work, but it is fussy, so that's just.
No, I'm so fascinated because it's like, I mean, I really loved their previous book, like, what an absolute banger. Please read A Guest in the
Thank you.
House, it rocks. Cause yeah, like, I feel like I work the opposite, where it's like, I wanna nail down everything about the story, everything, I want notes, I want everything to be approved before I start drawing.
That's wise. That's smart to do. I often learn a lot about the story as I'm going, and then I will go back and add pages or change out dialogue, like really late in the process. Like Guest in the House, I think I changed like every character's name like 5 times. And I had to like keep going back and I'm like, sorry, like to my editors, I'm like, I'm changing his name to this. And it's like, we don't care, just like make sure it's consistent or whatever. But yeah, I like to go back and adjust as I figure things out, because sometimes there's like, happy little accidents that come along where you're like, oh, this could tie back into this. But with Guest in the House, I did have the full story in my mind and like bullet pointed out. So like I do like sort of like bullet points of like, this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. And to get this feeling across, I can do a scene about this or a scene about this, and then as I'm actually making the book, I'm like, okay, I don't need all of these, so I take them off. But again, this is like, it's not like a portable workflow. That's why like it doesn't work with like when I'm doing collaborations.
No.
It's just like me being in a weird bunker.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, I'm always interested, so one of the cool things about comics and, something I've discovered over my many years in this industry is like everyone approaches them differently and everyone's process is different, and like, this is really striking to me because it's like, so I don't know quite how to describe this, but it's like you really prioritize the final look of the book.
Yes.
Where I feel like when I approach a graphic novel, what I prioritize is the story. So I mean, I don't know, this is an imperfect comparison, but it does kind of feel like you approach it from an art angle, and I'm approaching it from maybe a writing
Yeah, I'm
angle.
really trying to like control for like the atmosphere and look, and because if I don't think my art is going to be able, I have to, because usually when I approach comics too, like or a new comic, I want to decide how I'm going to draw for it. I don't use the same like pens or coloring necessarily in each comic. I want to find something that will suit the story and theme. So like, and how can I build off that rather than like applying like a similar, style or even font or something like that to each thing. I get like really in the weeds on the aesthetics for sure. Like I get very like formal about it.
No, that's cool. I mean, I'm kind of at a point, like I talked about, feeling like my creative well needed to be filled up.
You're also much faster than me.
That's the other thing, yeah. So like when I work, it's like I feel like every part of my process has to be efficient and has to be. I can't be redrawing things. I can't be, and for the most part, with very few exceptions, I've never like gone back and reworked a graphic novel, or at the art stage, right? So usually I start with a story outline, and that will actually go to my editor, and I will get notes on that to make sure that the story is all nailed down. And then I call it a thumbnail draft. And nobody sees this except for me, because I don't like doing more complicated thumbnails. I just want to do them very, very rough and just to get the flow of the book down. And it's basically an entire draft of the graphic novel done in thumbnail format. So, it's just drawn with like pen on lined paper, and it's like stick figures. It's incredibly rough. And then I'm able to, that's basically, and so it allows me to develop the emotional beats of the story and to figure out like the pacing, because it's like, like comics are art and writing, and for me, it's like one should take precedence over the other, and this allows me to put the art in at a very early stage, but also in a very loose format, so I'm not spending a lot of time on it. And that's essentially like the first script draft. So I'm writing in dialogue by hand, and then I'll take that draft and I will type up a clean script that is pretty much very, very similar to the final script, and that goes to my editor, and they give me notes on that. And then I just dive into pencils, so final pencils. And then I'll do some edits to the script along the way. I will letter my pencils, so sometimes lettering your dialogue, it'll change the dialogue, because you'll see it in the speech bubble and be like, that's not quite working. Yeah, so that sometimes gets changed. And then my editor will see the pencils, and then when it goes to inks, there's no more edits. Because I don't want to redraw stuff, and you've seen it, you've seen the script, you've seen the pencils, you need to give notes of those statements.
It's in my contract.
That's a smart
Don't
thing
even
to
look
do.
at
Well, it kind of is. I'm not sure of the exact language, but I just feel like, if you're working in the arts, you should be, and you're an editor, you need to be able to give notes at the pencil stage. You don't need to see final art in order to give notes. And then that's pretty much it. But like what you're talking about approaching each project differently and trying to find a different art style for that project, or like a style that brings out that project. Like I have actually never done that. Like I've always.
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like, that's why
Reinventing
totally have,
yourself every single time.
and like it's not like I'm doing a total reinvention, but like for each, like the pen in Photoshop that I use to ink Guest in the House, I just used it for Guest in the House. I don't use it for anything else, and I probably never will. And like I just want it, like it's that level of granular fussiness.
Yeah.
Just bury it in the backyard when you're done.
Yeah, and like for I think my most egregious case of working in this inefficient way was in Through the Woods. The final story was originally like 25 or 30 pages longer, and I sent it in to my editor when it was all finished, and she was like, "This ending, it is not good." And to her credit, she was like, "It's not scary enough." And she was, she's like, "You can go harder, like you don't need to make it like this." So I was like, okay, so I threw out all that art and did something else.
Oh my god, like that's the part, like all of that work, like that.
But it's just animation school. They love telling us that you just throw out like
all your
dozens
hard
of drawings, so you get the
But did
right
you really throw
bounce
it
of the
out
ball.
though?
But the
Did
point-
you-
Well, that was some parts of it. This is the other wildly efficient way that I work, which I was telling Faith earlier, which is that when I work traditionally on Through the Woods, I didn't just draw like a page on Bristol. I was for whatever reason, very worried about wasting Bristol space. So I would just draw all the images, like I would fit them in like Tetris pieces.
Wow.
And then I would scan that, and then I would cut that up in Photoshop and composite it. So there are, like, all my original pages don't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, they're just nonsensical.
They're like fever dreams.
Yeah, they're just like all the art from the page, but they're all
like upside down.
Yeah, because I wanted to like
Like
fuss.
paper dolls.
Because we were talking about this earlier too, that I'm like so messy with inks and with any physical media that I had to do so much correction when I scanned it to like take out all the blots and like the, when your like nib like explodes or whatever. So like I would cut it up.
That's incredible.
So like I don't know where it is.
It's very MC Escher in your mind.
So like just earlier you mentioned animation and like throwing away your drawings. I feel like I learned this particular way that I work that I is supposed to be hyper efficient. I learned that from animation.
That's true, yeah.
Because the idea, And it doesn't happen so much anymore, unfortunately, and I have strong opinions about that. My husband works in animation, so all my friends work in animation, and I have friends who have worked on like the Spider-Verse movies, amazing movies, but the process, their experiences working on those movies were not great. Because, so like in animation, you're supposed to nail everything down at the story stage, so at storyboards and at script stage, before you go to final art, because the final art, the final animation is so time consuming.
The way they worked on Spider-Verse, from what I had heard, is absolutely insane.
It's horrible. It was horrible. Yeah, so one of my friends told me that they had enough footage to make 3 different movies by the time they finished it. And yeah, people were just working insane hours. Like I remember reaching out to her at one point, being like, "Hey, it's Saturday, you wanna hang out?" She's like, "I'm working."
Yeah.
So yeah, like
that's like the director like wanting to be like, "Oh no, show it to me myself, and I'll tell you if it's bad or good or not."
And that was a huge problem on those movies. It's like, here I am spilling tea. But there was a big article. There's a big article that came out in Vulture about it. But basically, they had a director, or not a director, a producer who was a non-animation person, and this person just wanted to see everything finished in order to give notes. And it's like just like these other people, like it was dailies, and it's like that's not how the process should work. You know, you should nail everything down at the script stage, at the board stage, so that when you go to finals, you have everything cleaned up, and it's like you're not burning through your people, basically. You're not burning through your animators. So like this was actually a mindset that I got from animation.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know. I don't know.
Do you use those animation sheets that like you fill in like the pencils?
No, I just use lined paper.
Okay,
Paper.
I for a while had like a post-it note system when I was working on Speak, especially. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do a sweep of inks, whatever." It's basically the same animation system. I can't remember what we call those sheets.
Beat sheets, timing sheets, something like that. But I don't know. I mean, I just find it very inspiring to hear your process, and it feels.
That's nice.
I mean, it feels like it isn't the process when you look at the final project.
Yes,
you're like, this doesn't seem like this is how you arrived at this, but
I sort of feel it out as I go too, because also like a lot of.
But also, you're the only one you're torturing. You know?
Yes,
like,
that is my defense.
It's not like you have employees that you're, are doing amazing work and that you're telling them to throw it away.
It is my weird. There's like, there was a scene on. This is like so, whatever. But there's a scene on in the show News Radio. Do you remember the show News Radio? There's a scene where they're asking one character how she does the jumble so well. You know that thing in the newspaper where the words are, and she'd be like, "Oh, like it's like I look at it and I see this J over here, and the J says, put me first, put me first." So she just has like this completely intuitive jumble process, and that's how I feel about how I make comics.
No, I find it
jumble.
I find it so inspiring. Like it's such a different way to approach it, and it feels like an artist's way, like an artist, capital A art. Whereas I feel like the way I approach comics, it's like I'm very focused on the deadline. I'm very focused in producing work as efficiently as possible, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I make I make my living in comics, and the work itself is the proof. But considering I'm at a stage right now where it's like I'm looking for different ways to work, not to say that.
No, don't do this. You don't need to do this.
It's like, yes, I'm never gonna do that.
But I have fun, like the drawing and figuring out how things are gonna look is really fun and satisfying to me. So even if I don't end up using a page, I'll probably learn something from it.
And probably something new sometimes emerges from that that's like outside of your plan, maybe. Where you're like, oh, I didn't think of this, but now that this is sitting next to this, oh, what if.
Yes, that happens all the time.
Mind palace. That's wonderful. We have 2 minutes left. Hi, Ariel. Would you like to ask a question?
But I mean, wait.
Oh no, John's gonna make you use the microphone. Is it on? Turn it on.
But the thing that you're describing sounds exactly like, from a word artist point of view, like people that write prose, some of them are pantsers and some of them are planners. And you don't know which one you are, and each of them look at each other with bafflement and dismay.
Like, how could you do
right?
this?
Like,
well, or inspiration, right?
Yeah. But I mean, are you gonna start working?
I mean, probably not, but I do take a lot of, I think it is very cool for you to really sit and like try to like the art dictate the book, or like just to really invest in trying to bring the book visually to life before you really start writing it.
Being able to change what I want at the in the moment, I guess.
Like, I think that's really cool. I don't think I would ever do a book that I hadn't like scripted ahead of time, like that just seems like madness.
That's
Absolute
wild to me to
madness.
have it all laid out like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like that seems like working without a parachute or something like that. But I love the idea of
But now
spending-
that makes the anxiety makes the
Yeah.
work shine.
That's true, when you're doing like weird therapy on yourself, it helps, yeah.
But yeah, I love the idea of becoming more immersed in the art of the book before you start drawing the book, or maybe before you start writing or thinking about the script. Like that's something I hadn't thought of before, with the exception of Nameless City, which was a very, very old story idea that I just started, pecking at over the years and started drawing, and then it evolved to the form that it currently is. But I just feel like that particular process can be very time consuming, so I just feel like I don't have the time to do it.
Yes, nice.
So, yeah, but I would like to potentially.
Don't do what I have to.
I think we maybe have time for one more quick question before we have to be sauntering to the line.
Hello.
Hi.
You're talking about style for each book that you change. Do you feel that over the years your art has a distinct style you can look at and be like, this is E.M. Carroll style, or this is Faith Erin Hicks style? I'm thinking of, I don't know what to call them, the iconic sort of Faith Erin Hicks eyebrow. I mean, not eyebrow, cheek like lines.
Oh, yeah.
This thing, like you
Yeah.
look at that and you go, that is my style.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, when I say, like, I'm working on a different style, like, it's probably only perceptible really to me, that I'm like, this is completely different than whatever I've done. But to other people, it could mean whatever. I think when people talk about my style, they do picture how I drew 10 years ago the most, when I see it referenced. But that's fine, like, I don't mind. I think that's, the fun of it is that I can just do whatever I want. But like, if I take a new source of inspiration, I want to change it, or in terms of like using color or something like that. So like right now I'm like really into like a lot more detailed work and a lot of like weird organic shapes, and drawing the humans a bit more realistic than like 10 years ago. But I still think it all kind of basically looks like me doing outside observer. But I just like the approach is small things, I think, like font or what pen I'm using.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times I'm not really in control of my style.
Yeah.
Like I draw and that's what seems to come out. And I actually spent a lot of time in my 20s when I was a lot more inexperienced, trying to develop a style and trying to force myself to draw a certain way because I liked other people's art better than I liked my own. And I feel like that's just something we all go through as artists, where other people's artwork looks more appealing. So, I really wanted to draw in a certain cartoony style in my 20s. And I look back at the artwork from that era and I'm just like, oh my God, like I was trying so hard. Like I saw the effort in the artwork. And now my artwork feels looser. I do feel like my artwork has become a little more realistic. Like Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy, I feel like the figures were very human-sized, the artwork, the backgrounds were very realistic. And then my most recent book that I just finished up this year, it's a middle grade book called In Betweens. And there I tried to be more cartoony. So it's like the figures still look realistic, but their expressions are more exaggerated because it's young people, it's children, and also the book is about animation. It's about, two sisters who go to an animation summer camp, essentially. So that made sense for the book, but I feel like I'm still working within the narrow range of my
It's hard to ever really escape that
it really is.
blueprint.
Yeah. Because I don't know, it's like, I don't know, I feel like I get a lot of, when I do school visits, sometimes I feel like I always have a kid who comes up and asks about developing an art style. And I just feel like the best thing you can do is just to draw.
Yeah, it's not, I'm always like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out.
And I mean, nobody believes me,
No, yeah.
and I wouldn't have believed myself if I, could communicate with my 25-year-old self and be like, stop stressing, just draw, So yeah, I don't know. I've never, so another thing is I don't typically work with color, the way Em does. Most of my books, I collaborate with a colorist and they color it. So usually I'm like, this looks good, yay, like that kind of thing. I wish I knew more about color and about, color comics, because I feel like there is another opportunity to develop a distinct look in your work. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that should be my next project.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Faith. Thank you, Em, for coming to today and chatting with us about your, there's just a lot, so much there.
So much, oh.
Yes, but I'm going to just enjoy the memories we made this night. Thank you everyone for coming out. You can still come and visit Em and Faith at Prairie Comics Festival tomorrow at Millennium Library from 1 till 5 on the 3rd floor. It's free to attend. It is also free to just chat with them.
Yeah.
Come and say hi.
Yes, and let's just join me in thanking them again. Move on to the signing procedure.
Yes, indeed. So you'll see a signing table over here. There are 2 chairs behind it. We will put our creators in those chairs at just a moment. Well, allow them to sit there themselves. And we have a broad table over here covered with their work. So please do avail yourself of anything on here you might like. Visit the table to get it signed. Please do not ask them to draw bicycles. And if there are any titles you are looking for, please just let me know and I can rush off because we do have additional stock scattered throughout the store. Please go visit the Prairie Comics Festival tomorrow, and please give an enormously warm round of applause to Ian Carroll and Faith Erin Hicks. And of course.